Good afternoon, I'm Leila Masimova and you're watching A News. Now, the major stories making headlines today. U.S. stock market reacts strongly to President Trump's criticism of Fed Chair Jerome Powell. Drones strike Ukraine's Odesa as President Zelensky says Ukraine ready for talks on a court to halt attacks on civilian targets. Faithful hold a memorial service for Pope Francis and his home church, where he was educated in Catholic faith. U.S. stock and the dollar have taken a hit again. President Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, calling him a major loser and demanding swift interest rate cuts. Investors are worried about the Fed's independence amid the fallout from Trump's trade war.
Wall Street's major indexes opened lower on Monday after President Donald Trump renewed his attacks on Fed Chair Jerome Powell, unsettling investors amid an escalating trade dispute. Trump is urging the Fed to cut interest rates quickly, accusing Powell of reacting too slowly and warning of a potential economic downturn without immediate action. Criticism comes as markets remain volatile due to the administration's own tariff policies. Experts say the situation is cause for concern.
Today with stocks, it's another ugly day. You had some tweets or Truth Social posts from the President of the United States threatening to fire Jay Powell. This is a continuation of the tariff and policy uncertainty we've seen. Policy uncertainty now is well above where it was even during COVID, and with the potential for Jay Powell being fired, which would be unprecedented. That's really causing investors to really worry today.
Market reaction was swift. The S&P 500 dropped 2.4%, the Dow fell 2.5%, and the Nasdaq lost more than 2.5%, adding to steep declines seen throughout the year. Even assets typically seen as safe havens were not spared. The dollar fell to its lowest level since 2022, and US government bond yields rose as investors demanded better returns. Asian markets saw smaller declines. Japan's Nikkei and Australia's ASX dipped around 0.1%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng slid 0.5%. Tech stocks were hit particularly hard.
The policies are absolutely erratic. There is no strategy. The attacks on the Fed, the tariffs on, off, the huge fiscal deficits without any strategy whatsoever to get them under control. All of this is weighing heavily on the mood of the markets and on the public mood as well.
Meanwhile, gold surged past $3,400 an ounce, setting a new record as investors sought safer ground. With political pressure mounting and global uncertainty rising, markets are left bracing for what comes next.
The World Bank and International Monetary Fund spring meetings are kicking off in Washington, D.C. Representatives from multiple countries are expected to be there this week, hoping to strike a trade deal. The annual talks will focus on the fallout from the hike in American tariffs. Our correspondent Odesa Bandar has more from Washington.
Heads of major banks and finance leaders from across the globe are in Washington this week for the biannual meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, as pressure mounts on some of the world's largest economies to finalize a trade deal with the world's largest economy, the United States. The meetings this week will include direct bilateral and multilateral talks between finance ministers seeking foreign investment and project financing, and for some, seeking approval for debt relief. Tariffs will, of course, dominate discussions among world finance leaders, as a number of countries scramble to close bilateral trade deals with Washington in the hopes of staving off massive spikes in the tariffs that were ordered by President Trump. Japan and the United Kingdom are among some of the countries that will have senior trade and treasury officials in Washington this week, hoping to strike a deal with the administration. IMF Managing Director Kristalina Georgieva said last week that the World Economic Outlook's growth projection will include, quote, notable markdowns, but not recessions. President Trump's additional reciprocal tariffs are paused for 90 days, but a 10% general tariff across all countries will be in effect. And there doesn't seem to be any signs that Trump's massive tariffs on China will be negotiated down anytime soon. Meanwhile, World Bank President Ajay Banga is expected to include nuclear and gas projects into the bank's financing portfolio, a move that will likely be appreciated by the Trump White House. Trump's Liberation Day tariffs have shaken up global economic norms, and that seems just fine with the White House. Behind the scenes, finance ministers from around the world will hold meetings with their American counterparts to negotiate a reduction in the tariffs before the 90-day pause expires. In that context, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent will be sitting down with representatives from at least a dozen separate countries as IMF and World Bank officials hope to reassure a Trump administration that has been skeptical of traditional economic globalists. Treasury Secretary Bessent will give a speech on Wednesday that is expected to outline U.S. priorities for the IMF and the World Bank. IMF Managing Director Georgieva has said that the subsequent trade deals that might emerge from President Trump's unprecedented reset of the global trade networks may, quote, in her words, add some additional vibrancy to the global economy. So clearly here, tariffs will be on everybody's minds as world financial leaders gather in the American capital. I'm Ube Shabander for A News in Washington, D.C.
China has warned it will take resolute countermeasures against other countries negotiating with the U.S. if they make a deal at China's expense during the trade war. Comments from Beijing come after report that the U.S. plans to pressure governments to restrict trade with China in exchange for exemptions to U.S. tariffs.
China is accusing Washington of abusing tariffs and warns countries against striking a broader economic deal with the United States at its expense. The comments ratchets up its rhetoric in a spiraling trade war between the world's two biggest economies. The move comes as US President Donald Trump moves ahead with sweeping new tariffs, sparing most countries except China. Beijing now faces duties of up to 145%. While other nations enjoy a 90-day pause. China has threatened resolute countermeasures against any trade partners that harm its economic interests, including raising levies on American goods to 125%. The country also plans to convene an informal United Nations Security Council meeting this week, claiming America is using trade as a weapon and its impact on global development efforts. Meanwhile, Washington continues negotiations with a growing list of trade partners. Japan, South Korea, and Indonesia are among those exploring deals, some reportedly considering increased US imports and a shift away from Chinese goods. President Trump argues that the tax hikes will help revive US manufacturing, raise government revenue, and boost domestic consumption. But economists warn that undoing decades of global supply chain integration will take time and could expose global markets to short-term volatility.
Ukrainian authorities say a large-scale overnight drone strike hit residential areas in the port city of Odesa during Monday night. There were multiple fires which caused damages to several apartment buildings, according to local officials. Early reports say at least 3 people have been injured. The attack comes amid calls from Kyiv for a ceasefire on civilian infrastructure. Odesa has repeatedly been targeted during the ongoing war with Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said that Kyiv remains committed to halting attacks on civil infrastructure and is prepared for dialogue aimed at achieving a lasting ceasefire. Speaking ahead of key meetings with European and US officials scheduled for Wednesday, Zelensky said that the real and sustainable peace must begin with unconditional ceasefire. He called on Moscow to provide a clear response to Ukraine's proposal and reiterated Kiev's readiness to talk. Zelensky added that Ukrainian delegations are focused on securing an immediate end to hostilities as the first step toward broader peace negotiations.
Ukraine maintains its proposal not to strike at least civilian infrastructure, and we are expecting a clear response from Moscow. We are ready for any conversation about how to achieve this. There is an obvious, simplest and most reliable path: to stop missile and long-range drone strikes, which would automatically ensure the protection of all civilian infrastructure. A ceasefire, real and lasting, must be the first step toward a reliable and enduring peace.
Earlier, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Russia has to carefully study the Easter truce results, adding that Moscow was open to any peace initiatives and expects a similar attitude from Kiev.
Overall, we saw a decrease in combat activity on the part of the enemy. This is true. These are assessments, including those of the commanders of our groupings. But nevertheless, there were almost 5,000 violations, 4,900. This includes 6 attacks and 90 attempted airplane-type drone attacks. I think there were 400 artillery attacks. But overall still, there has been a reduction in activity. We welcome that, and we are ready to look at the future. Regarding the proposal on ending the strikes against the civilian infrastructure, we should look into it.
Joining us now from Chicago to discuss the prospects of direct bilateral talks between the warring parties in Ukraine is Ali Kasman, Director of Protect Ukraine Now. Mr. Kasman, thanks for joining.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So the situation we have here is that Russian President Vladimir Putin has signaled that he's open to bilateral talks with Ukraine, with the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov later clarifying that the Russian's leader comments indicated a willingness to engage in direct talks about not striking civilian targets. How important is this moment?
This is a moment that just once more time underscores that Russia is playing a game. They have broken the Easter weekend ceasefire that was announced, their attacks and hostility on the front line, and nothing that they say is trustworthy. Their only signal they consistently send throughout the time is that they want to seize Ukraine's existence. And any negotiations that we may see coming tomorrow in London, they're going to be just a game where Russia is going to be pushing Ukraine to acknowledge certain territorial concessions.
And with the pressure exerted by the Trump administration increasing, do you think a 30-day ceasefire deal is likelier than before?
There could be a change in the hostility. There could be different levels of intensity depending on specific directions on the front line. However, I don't believe that a ceasefire is possible at this point. The only way Russia is going to be negotiating in a good faith is when Ukraine comes from a position of strength. That means significantly more air defense and otherwise control of the sky above Ukraine. Also, Ukraine needs more long-range capabilities to keep Russians away.
Ali Kasman, Director of Protect Ukraine Now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Telegram founder Pavel Durov has praised France's National Assembly for rejecting a controversial bill that would have forced encrypted messaging apps to create backdoors, potentially compromising user privacy. On a post on X, Durov warned that such laws do little to stop crime and instead endanger the privacy of law-abiding citizens. He emphasized Telegram's long-standing commitment to encryption, saying the platform would rather leave a market than betray users' trust. Durf also cautioned that similar proposals are now being pushed by the European Commission. Pope Francis will be laid to rest this Saturday in the Vatican City at 10 o'clock local time. The Pontiff will be buried at the Basilica of St. Mary Major in Rome. The move follows an 88-year-old wishes wanting a simple and modest funeral. It will be the first time in more than a century that a Pope is entered outside the Vatican. Afterwards, a 9-day mourning period will precede the papal conclave, during which cardinals will elect the next Pope. World leaders, including US President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, are expected to attend. The faithful gather for prayer services around the world to honor Pope Francis, who died on Monday. Mourners in his hometown of Buenos Aires remember a man who dared to confront the Church's deepest challenges. He was the first Latin American pontiff and a voice for peace and reform.
The San Jose de Flores Basilica in Buenos Aires was packed out on Monday as people gathered to pay their respects to Pope Francis, who died a day after he gave an Easter Sunday message. The pontiff grew up and was educated in the Catholic faith in this city. The Mass was led by Archbishop Jorge Garcia, who highlighted that Pope Francis never avoided addressing societal problems and urged Argentines to remain united during times of division.
He put on the table and didn't hide the need for transparency in the Church, the need for reforms in the Church that were longed for. Maybe for this reason he was so criticised, because he didn't silence the problems but put them on the table. He didn't hide them or make them up, but proposed humanity take charge of them.
He recalled that one of Pope Francis's main concerns was military conflicts.
But war starts in our own hearts, and Argentines know this well, because we have a powerful weapon between our teeth called the tongue, with which we destroy each other. And if our tongue is not enough, we have something called social media.
The ceremony was also attended by Argentine Vice President Victoria Villarruel. According to the Buenos Aires government, the San Jose de Flores Basilica is the church where Pope Francis, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, spent his childhood, embraced the Catholic faith, and decided to become a priest. He also celebrated Holy Week masses at this church. The pontiff was born in the city in 1936 and passed away at the Vatican at the age of 88. He had been hospitalized for more than 5 weeks, suffering from double pneumonia. Officials say he died from a stroke and heart failure.
Azerbaijan and China discussed enhancing their investment partnership, focusing on joint business initiatives and mutual interests. The China-Azerbaijan Industrial and Investment Cooperation Promotion Conference, held in Beijing with nearly 200 participating companies, was highlighted as a key platform for advancing bilateral cooperation. A memorandum of understanding signed between Gazprom and China's NDRC is expected to boost Chinese investment and Azerbaijan and deepen economic collaboration. The second Turkic Trade Fair Forum and exhibition on trade and investment cooperation among Turkic states will take place at the Baku Expo Center from June 10th, according to the Organization of Turkic States. The major business event aims to strengthen collaboration in industry, investment, technology and services among OTS member and observer states, while also promoting access to global markets. The fair will feature products and innovations across more than 20 sectors. Expert-led conferences will be broadcast on site, covering investment opportunities, key industries, business collaborations and practical solutions. The first edition of the forum was held at the Istanbul Exhibition Centre in November last year. Afghanistan and Kazakhstan have taken major steps towards deepening their economic partnership following high-level talks in Kabul that resulted in a comprehensive roadmap for trade expansion and infrastructure development. Our correspondent Tamim Bahiz has more from Kabul.
Afghanistan and Kazakhstan are set to significantly boost their economic ties following a high-level meeting in Kabul. Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs Mullah Abdul Ghani Brother met with Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister Serik Zomangarin at the Gulkhana Palace. The two sides discussed expanding cooperation across key sectors, including trade, agriculture, mining, transport, and industry. Mullah Brother highlighted shared interest and growing trade between the two nations, emphasizing Afghanistan's commitment to regional economic integration. A roadmap has been signed to raise bilateral trade to $3 billion, with new agreements in agriculture, livestock, mining, and railway transport underway. Kazakhstan pledged $500 million to help implement the Torghundi-Herat railway project and proposed setting up a logistic company in Herat. Zomangarin also announced plans for an internet cable project to provide affordable access and expressed readiness to invest in Afghanistan's mining, oil and gas sectors. Both sides agreed to resume Kabul-Astana flights, ease visa processes and enhance banking cooperation. Later, Kazakh's Deputy Prime Minister also met with Afghanistan's acting Foreign Minister Amir Khan Muttaqi to discuss bilateral issues. Separately, Kazakhstan's ambassador in Kabul met with Afghanistan's acting Minister of Public Works to explore further investment opportunities, particularly in railway development and transit infrastructure. The discussion underscored a shared interest in turning Afghanistan into a key trade and transit hub for the region. This is Tamim Bahiz in Kabul for A News.
Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan met with his Algerian counterpart Ahmet Attaf during his official visit to Algiers. To further strengthen bilateral ties, Fidan is expected to co-chair the third meeting of the Turkey-Algeria Joint Planning Group alongside Attaf. Turkey says it has marked a significant milestone in its national airspace program. The domestically developed UAV Aksungur, produced by Turkish Aerospace Industries, has achieved a record-breaking flight, showcasing not just high-altitude capabilities, but also the seamless integration of several homegrown defense technologies.
Turkey's unmanned combat aerial vehicle has reached an altitude of 40,000 feet. That's more than 12,000 kilometers. The Aksungur UAV is powered by the locally developed TEI-PD-170 engine. Built by Turkish Aerospace Industries, or TAI, the company says it marks a new altitude record for national aerospace engineering. The company says the onboard systems were also successfully tested during the flight, including the Aselflir 500, an advanced electro-optical system developed by Aselsan, and the heated battery unit produced by Aspilsan. Officials say both systems performed flawlessly at high altitude, underlining the growing maturity of Turkey's defense technology ecosystem. Earlier this month, Aksungur also demonstrated precision strike capabilities, deploying Aselsan-manufactured LGK-81 and LGK-82 guided munitions. The unmanned aircraft achieved direct hits on its designated targets, confirming its role as a high-performance combat platform.
Thanks for spending a moment with A News. Until we meet again.